Hi there, my name is Cindy Koyier. I'm the Senior Legal and Data Protection Officer at Sentinel Africa, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about data protection. So you might be wondering, what is data protection exactly? Data protection is a set of rules that apply towards personally identifiable information. So this is information that can be traced back to an individual. So we need governance in place, and the data protection framework does exactly this. So it protects citizens' data, especially sensitive data, from insofar as confidentiality, accessibility, and its integrity as well. So it essentially just protects this data from unauthorized access and gives full transparency of what the information is being collected for in the first place, and ensures that whoever the data subject is, that is the person who the information applies to, is aware of everything surrounding the information and where it's going, how it is going to be stored, and what companies intend to do with it. Insofar as the GDPR is a set of regulations that were set in place by the European Union to protect citizens' data. And it was very, very comprehensive. It explained data subject rights, what organizations were bound. It also goes in so far as making the regulations apply to European Union citizens who are outside of the EU. So in the instance that, for example, an expatriate is in Africa, the GDPR laws apply to them. So how does this trace back to Africa? With this in mind, we needed to have a framework in place to protect ourselves from any issues and not being compliant with what is required in the GDPR. So in an effort to join the global movement towards data protection, we enacted the Data Protection Act, which is quite synonymous with the provisions of the GDPR and outlines everything synonymously, with a little more context that is specific to each individual each individual African country. So the companies that the Data Protection Act applies to essentially is any company that handles data on large scale and handles sensitive data. So we have also data protection regulations in place. However, they are in draft, but the move is towards the implementation of the same. So once the same are enforced, the list that is provided within the regulations, which includes faith-based organizations, financial institutions, credit reference bureaus, or even telecommunication service providers, it also applies to them. So there's quite an extensive list, but essentially if it's any company that handles personally identifiable information on a large scale, or even anything to do with biometric data or even children's data, it applies to this. Some of the things that companies can do to comply with the requirements of the Data Protection Act include employment of a data protection officer. So the wording within the Act itself does not make this mandatory. However, and so if your organization handles specific, there are certain prerequisite forms of data that makes it mandatory, essentially, in a sense, for you to have a data protection officer. So this includes if you handle biometric data at a large scale, as I had mentioned before, or any sensitive data or data that involves children. So the greater the impact that your processing of this information will have, the more likelihood that you will need a data protection officer. So the first step is to have a data protection officer who will guide the organization through compliance. So ensuring that there's understanding, creating awareness on data protection and compliance, also assisting in conducting a data protection impact assessment, which is a requirement under the Act, creating knowledge on the penalties that are there, and also continuous monitoring, because you can have certain things in place. For example, you can have a data privacy policy in place, but the buck doesn't stop there. You have to continue monitoring, and there are other procedures that are necessary, and as such, that is why the first step to compliance is having someone to guide you, which is the data protection officer. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen to this today. I hope that you've gained a little more information when it comes to data protection, and hopefully we'll engage further so that we can help you on your journey towards data protection compliance.